Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to give everybody a few minutes to join our call today, but really looking forward to this great conversation. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Ronan, and welcome to Are You Running Session 2. Are You Running was created 6 years ago as a political campaign training exercise for undergraduate students at Rutgers University to learn the ins and outs about running for office and also serving as a candidate. We're really looking forward to a conversation today, our second conversation in this three-part series, with two campaign and legislative operatives right now from the state of New Jersey. We want to give a huge thank you to our co-sponsor, the Division of Diversity, Inclusion, and Civic Engagement at Rutgers University, Camden. And I want to just get started with our conversation today. If you have any questions during the event, you can feel free to use the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. This event is being recorded, so there will be a recording afterwards for those who are not able to attend, but we're really looking forward to having everyone join us today. To get us started, I want to introduce our two panelists that we have for this event right now. First is Dais Davis. She is the current Chief of Staff to Senator Vin Gopal of the 11th District. She first embarked on getting involved with her community while attending Neptune High School through her service on the Neptune Township's Mayor's Youth Advisory Cabinet. Prior to becoming Chief of Staff, she served in various roles within Senator Vin Gopal's office, including legislative intern, events coordinator, constituent staff services director, and also as Deputy Chief of Staff for a year prior to serving as the Chief of Staff in her current role. She currently serves on the Board of Trustees for the Neptune Township Library and Brookdale Community College in Monmouth County, as well as a board member for CCC Housing, the Affordable Housing Alliance, and the Neptune Township Planning Board. She's also a Rutgers University alum, and she's currently pursuing a master's in social work at Rutgers University. So welcome, Dyese. It's great to have you here today. Our second panelist is Scott Maraldo. Scott grew up in Howell, New Jersey, and he earned his undergraduate degree at George Washington University. During his undergraduate degree, he began working for U.S. Congressman Chris Smith, and also in Monmouth County, who represents Howell and the rest of the 4th Congressional District in the House of Representatives. Upon his graduation in 2009, he went to work for Congressman Smith full-time and continued doing so in a variety of roles for the following decade. He worked on Representative Smith's re-election campaign starting in 2010 and ending in 2018, where he served as campaign manager for 4 of those campaigns. Scott is also a CAV officer in the New Jersey Army National Guard, and he currently lives in Howell, New Jersey with his wife, Amanda. So welcome, Scott. It's great to have you. It's great to have so much Monmouth County representation on this call today, but we're really looking forward to having a conversation with you both this afternoon. So for those who are just joining us again, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and let's get started on our conversation this morning. So our first question is really talking a little bit about your current role. So I'm going to ask Dyese this first, and then we're just going to have a little bit of a conversation between our panelists. And so, but Dyese, can you describe your current role and what led you to be in this position?
Sure. So currently I'm Chief of Staff to Senator Vin Gopal in the 11th District, as you guys just heard. My role consists of a whole host of things. So I oversee our team of 5 people. We had some shifts, so I have to remember the number. But I oversee the team. We have a communications team, constituent services team, events planning, scheduling, really everything under the sun we do here. And I also wear many hats in assisting as needed. As a lot of you probably know, we saw a big influx of unemployment cases. So our office can help individuals advocate with various state agencies. So I've been helping to navigate some casework, helping with communications, event planning, really anything that's needed in the office. I try to roll up my sleeves and be a part of whatever needs to happen. How I ended up here, I graduated from Rutgers with a major in criminal justice and a minor in political science and sociology. When I graduated, I decided that I took issue with how punitive our criminal justice system is. I don't think that there's a lot of room for rehabilitation. So I said, I'm either going to be a defense attorney and do pro bono work in defending folks, or I'm going to maybe run for office, but I like to try things before I jump in. So I decided to intern at the legislative office of Assemblymembers Hotelling in Downey. I came across that because Assemblyman Hotelling was my mayor at one point while I was in the Mayor's Youth Advisory Cabinet. And I said, oh, I know this person and I know he's a good guy. So let's see where this takes me. And that was about 6 years ago and I never left. So I kind of just rose through the ranks, started as an intern, and probably like every 6 months got a new position, and worked my way up. And in March of 2020, it was the day that the world shut down. It was when I was supposed to start with Senator Gopal as Deputy Chief of Staff. So I started both feet in the fire, trying to figure out how we were going to navigate this pandemic. And became Chief of Staff in August of 2020 and been there since.
That's great. And I think it's a really great point that you started off with that I always like to tell interns, try something before you commit to it first. So getting your feet wet is a great opportunity and really wonderful and really a great opportunity to learn on the job at the start of the pandemic of 2 years ago. So thanks so much for sharing that. It's really fascinating. And Scott, I see you also have some experience also doing some, interning or work in your undergraduate career. So I'm curious to see about how that shaped your current role and how you kind of got started.
I really agree with Dyese. You really should not jump in head first to this stuff. It really rarely works out well that way. And I took kind of I guess a similar course that she did. So I was at GW doing my undergrad. And through not through any deep decision making, but I knew I wanted to intern, and I said, all right, well, kind of like Dyese, exactly what you said. Like, oh, I've heard of Chris Smith. He seems like a good guy. We'll just do that, right? That should be fine. And so I started interning there, and just like you, Dyese, I just never left. So I went through undergrad, started working when I was out of school, and then about not quite a year after I was out of school, the campaign manager quit. In September, which is bad form. You're not supposed to do that, but she did. And the boss was like, hey, go up there and, do what you can. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. She's like, yeah, that's okay. We'll teach you. And I discovered that I really liked it. I discovered that I loved it. So for the next 5 cycles, or I guess the next 4 cycles after that one, I was in that role. And sure enough, they did teach me either intentionally or unintentionally what I was doing. And I bounced back on off years to the federal office as these things go. And I did that till 2018, after which my then girlfriend, now wife, correctly told me that campaign life and married life are not compatible. And that I was going to have to choose one of the two. And we're now married, so you can see which I chose. And right now, the kind of what I'm doing now is I'm the director of constituent relations for Bridgewater Township, which means that it's kind of a little bit of the same stuff in that we're communicating with residents. Here is the message that we're giving you, but rather than a political message, it's like here is what the town is doing for you, and here is how to participate in that, rather than hey, you should vote for this guy. It's kind of a different message, a lot of the same delivery systems though. That's kind of how I came to be here.
Thanks so much. And I really appreciate the honesty. I think a lot of us who work in politics and civic engagement, especially in election period times, it's often like, does my personal life or my employment life take priority right now? So I appreciate the honesty. Another great tip for students to know before they jump in feet first. So now I kind of want to transition to talking a little bit about students. So how would you encourage students? I'm going to ask Scott specifically first. How would you encourage students to just get started working on a political campaign? And how large of a role does networking really play as well? I know you shared a little bit. It didn't play a super big role, but do you think it does? Do you think it does now compared to in the past?
I think it always plays a role, but I also think it always plays a limited role. And actually, I wrote out notes what I was going to talk about. And this is one of the things that I had on there, which is that it's Dyese, I don't, if correct me if I say something wrong, but it sounds like both of us kind of took like, we looked at somebody that we liked in the first place and started working with that person, right? And that's not generally the way that this works. So I have a lot of friends in the field, and most of them come and say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a political campaign manager. I'm going to do this. And then they got to go find somebody to work for. And sometimes your options of people to work for are not great, no matter what side you're on. And that's not a political statement. It's just a statement about people. And, you know, it sounds like Dyese and I know for me, I didn't really have to worry about that, because I knew from the way that I gradually become involved with Congressman Smith, that I deeply admired the man. And I think he, you know, love him or hate him, he's an honest guy, right? Like, you don't have to agree with him to recognize, okay, he's an honest person. And I think really that's something to really look at, because if you decide, okay, I'm going to go be in, you know, I'm going to be kind of a mercenary here. This is what I'm going to do, and I don't care who I do it for. I care that I'm doing it. That's going to land you in some rough situations. So before you really commit yourself to this is the thing that I'm going to do, ask yourself also, under what conditions am I willing to do it? Am I going to, you know, who do I want to work for, and where's my red line of people that I don't want to work for? You know, I have a close friend who they ended up being a campaign manager for somebody in this state, and they knew that this candidate was just not a good person to work for, and they you know, this candidate didn't treat their staff well, didn't treat people well. Like, it's a decision to make. Are you willing to do that? And so before you get involved, I would urge you not so much to network, but yeah, dip your toe in, find that, start at the bottom by all means. I think that's the best way to do it. But be careful. Think about it first. You know, decide what you're willing to compromise and what you're not willing to.
Dyese, do you want to have a little follow-up about just like, I mean, it sounded like that was talking a lot about values, or if you have anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Scott said. I think the only thing that he left out was for not only do we believe in the people that we work for, but their reelection is dependent upon whether or not we have jobs. So we have that little extra oomph of
Vested interest, right?
working really, really hard so that we can continue to be employed. But yeah, I think we both lucked out in that we really cared about the people that we were working for, and the people and their values and what they stood for. The reason I stayed on at the legislative office was because I saw the passion that the two assembly members had, especially when it came to constituent services and helping people. You know, there was times where it was way after 5 that I was chatting somebody up, trying to figure out how we can get them assistance with this agency or that agency, or like a 5 o'clock on a Friday after social services was closed and somebody homeless said I needed somewhere to stay, right? So they instilled these values that really struck a chord with me. I would agree though that sometimes it depends on the type of person you are, right? So like I have a lot of friends and colleagues who have worked on campaigns, and they are just very competitive people, and they like the competition of it. And they have a goal, and their goal is to be a campaign manager or political operative, and you have to work your way up to be able to gain all those skills. And it might be that you're working with someone that you don't align with 100%, but you align with 50% or 75%. So it's really a matter of what your goal is at the end of the day. If you find a candidate, if you're lucky enough to find a candidate that you really believe in, and you believe in their values, and you support everything that they're doing, then you know you have an easier way about it. But if there are some things that you might struggle with how some of their values are, this could be your opportunity to say, hey, did you ever think of it this way? And maybe change their mind or give them a different perspective as they're going along, or just understand that there are some things that you just won't see eye to eye with. When we're interviewing people, one of the questions is, you might have to represent something that like you might not personally believe in, right? And how do you do that? And at the end of the day, you're there for the candidate who has certain views, and where you're not always going to agree. But I think that the most important thing is that the person will listen to you and understand at least what your perspective is.
I think
Oh, sorry. And networking can be important. and it's very important to have follow through. I think that is like the biggest skill or attribute that someone can have, because it's not so much, it is who you know sometimes, but it's how you present yourself in the situation. So I came in fairly cold. I didn't think I was going to be involved in government or politics, right? But as an intern, I showed that you could rely on me. I was reliable. Whatever you asked me to do, if I said I was going to do it, it got done, right? So they saw that ability in me. And that was kind of how I was able to catapult to where I am. And I try to instill that in the interns that we have here. Be reliable, be responsive. Even if the answer is no, just say, you know, this is no and this is why, right? Because we don't want to leave anyone hanging.
I love both of those points. I think I've been enjoying so much of what everyone's been sharing about, just really speaking of just the values, and also, you know, really kind of highlighting in politics, we're not always going to agree with, you know, other perspectives. I think we can all come to a same page eventually, but it could be a great opportunity for students to learn from somebody who they may not meet all the same, what am I trying to say? Everybody might not agree on all the same things, but everybody can still try and work together. But great point about following through. I saw lots of head shaking of just like following through is a really important part of being an intern, also a really important part of just being a great employee eventually in a full-time position. So keeping that in mind as well. So thank you both for like those great tips and just information so far. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about like some of the challenges that you've experienced. I'm going to start with Dyese on this one of just like challenges of working in a legislative offices. You can touch on the hours, you can touch on just the commitment. Other challenges, working with the public is a huge challenge for both campaigns and working in an office. But I want to start with Dyese for this one.
So challenges in working in a legislative office, I would say, on a campaign too, definitely the hours. You should know kind of what you're getting yourself into. It's long hours, it's exhausting hours, but it's usually worth it in the end. Even if your candidate may not win, you make a lot of connections and you get to know a lot of people that you may not have known before. I would definitely say working with the public. The COVID-19 pandemic showed a different side of people. A somewhat concerning side. Folks got very aggressive, and because they were so frustrated, and because, you know, there was a lot of hopelessness and despair. So keeping in mind that they're not mad at me, they're mad at the situation, and being able to navigate that. But like it was okay, because at the end we were able to fix it, and, you know, their attitudes changed. They just, when they realized that there was light at the end of the tunnel, there was someone there to help them, it wasn't as aggressive as it used to be. And I would say when I first started in a ledge office, I think a lot of people have this idea that politicians can do whatever they want, they can fix whatever they want if they want to do it, right? But we had folks who were reaching out that had like significant legal issues we couldn't help with. So it's frustrating to me, who likes to fix things. I'm like a fixer. I like to try to get a result, and like the result that we want. It was frustrating to me that like I couldn't help them with this landlord issue because I can't give legal advice. It was frustrating that there were some things as it pertains to, you know, signing up for various programs where they want all of this documentation. And I just like, as the person helping, I was overwhelmed, and I couldn't imagine being that person in the position that needs this assistance, having to come up with all this documentation that if you are someone who moves place to place, if you're homeless, you might not have a social security card, you might not have ID, proof of residency, right? Because we need residency to sign up for a lot of programs, but if I don't have a home, I can't show proof. So it was very frustrating not being able to resolve things instantly, but it became beneficial because we saw gaps in the way that regulations were that we could address legislatively.
I think that's a great point about just some of the challenges and everything. And yeah, oftentimes people are angry because they're frustrated with what's going on. It's not that they're angry with you. You're just the person on the phone or the person over email. They could have said this to anybody. So trying not to take that personally is a huge point. Scott, I want to pass it off to you about specifically working with campaigns, of just some challenges that you've also experienced.
Yeah, so I love that job. And yeah, Dyese, the hours are awful, like they absolutely are. But like, you know, right, I didn't mind it, you know, that was never my problem. The challenge that I always found was keeping my own perspective. Because what I found with campaigns is that you know, Dyese, when they come to you and they're asking for a service, right? Like they're trying to get help. Okay. When you're not working in that legislative office, but rather on the campaign side, the people that you're interacting with on both sides of the aisle, your allies and your opponents, they don't want to help. A lot of times you're going to talk to a lot of people who are purposefully going to give you their very worst. Okay. And that is just a political reality. That is the way it is. All right. I don't want to, I'm not trying to discourage like young kids that you have, Jessica. I'm really not. I'm just telling you this is the truth. Okay. And I remember this one time, I forget which year it was, but you know, Chris is a Catholic and everybody knows that. This opponent group like purposefully desecrated a religious symbol and sent it off to us. And like, it's not a matter of agreement or a disagreement. You know, as far as I'm concerned, you just don't do that. Like, there's no circumstances under which I, as a human being, would ever do that to anyone, no matter how much I do or don't agree with them. We just don't do that. Like, to me, that's basic human decency. And these people apparently didn't agree with that. Now, like, there was a world in which I'm going to take that personally, and I'm going to take that home, and I'm going to stew over it, and it's going to bother me, and I'm going to find myself that I'm just like, I'm going to become that a little bit because I'm going to hate them back, right? And that's what I mean. That was the only challenge I ever had, which is that like, I got to take that stuff and I got to let it go, because in the end, this is a job and it's not my existence. And the moment that I really let that compromise my true existence, because, you know, people would say all kinds of hateful things, like just awful stuff. And I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to let that type thing on either side. Like, don't get me wrong. I've heard awful things come from both sides of the aisle, right? I'm not going to let that be who I am. And sometimes having that thrown at you for what, 6-7 months at a time without a break is keeping that separation is a little bit difficult. And that was the only challenge that I ever felt, because I don't want to be that. I firmly believe that, like, if you've reached the point that you truly hate the people that disagree with you just because they disagree with you, you need to get out and do something else. That's not the way it's supposed to be, as far as I'm concerned.
If I can add to that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're right. Boundaries on the political side can get a little iffy. So you have to really know who you are and where you stand as an individual. Because like, I know with my opinion is family is off limits, right? But we see people attack family members on both sides. We see people talk about looks, which is like completely unnecessary. And it's all about civility. The senator has a series going at Monmouth University. And that's what they talked about. They talked about how, like, when you look at the COVID briefings, right, everybody's not commenting on the numbers or commenting on the rules. They're commenting on the governor and what he looks like and what his wife looks like and his kids. Like, that's not relevant to what his policy is, and it's not appropriate. Same with Congressman Smith. They say things about him all the time, and it's just like, what's the point, right? Let's have like an educated conversation. Let's be civil, but like when we start throwing mud, that's not getting us anywhere.
Yeah, like, Dyese, I'm happy to argue with you all day, but I'm not going to personally insult you or your boss. And
much appreciated. Same.
Right? Yeah, and if that's like if that's what, you know, if in 5-10 years, Jessica, that's what your students find themselves doing or find themselves pulled to do, I would tell them to keep the center that they're supposed to have. And if they can't do that, then they should do something else. Because that to me was always, you know, the hardest thing is just, I'm not gonna let that be who I am, because it's when it's thrown at you for 8 months at a time, it is easier than it sounds to forget that that's not who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we had the reactions button right here on Zoom, but my reactions aren't working. But I think you two have spoken on such important points, just about civility in politics, and something that often gets left behind. A lot of, you know, we often see all the time on social media, on the news, just below the belt comments on both sides of the aisle from everybody. And it's not creating any kind of productive conversations. It's not solving any problems. It's only making our divisions worse. And, you know, when we're in such an intense period of time right now, in the pandemic, in our elections right now, that's only making people and, you know, civility worse in this country. So I really am so appreciative that you both have spoken on that point. So we can, you know, encourage our students to really, if they're going to be getting involved in it, do it for the right reasons. Do it for somebody that you know, you do support, for the causes that you support, but not to throw mud at the other people as well, because it's not solving anything. You're not adding to anything as well in civil service. So keeping that in mind, really great points. Now I want to talk a little bit about, I guess we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I want to pass this off to, I think, Scott first. So this would be, what is something that you wish you had learned before you got into campaigns or working in legislative office? Just something that if somebody would have told you, it could have been really beneficial or saved a lot of heartache or issues.
I think it would have been just fanatical preparation. I think that would have been it for me, because when you're on this campaign, right? You don't have enough of anything ever. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough help. You don't have enough, most of all, time. Time is the thing that you never have enough of, right? So like, you just never have enough of anything. No matter what it is, you don't have enough of it. And so you have to make decisions about, you know, I have X amount of time, I have X amount of money, I have X, you know, whatever it is. And so I have to decide, and this is really your job, is to decide, well, with the time I have, with the resource I have, where am I going to put that into so it's most effective? And what I found is that the answer to that question almost always, or to get the right answer to that question, almost always lies with preparation, right? And so, you know, I think that if someone had told me that, you know, no matter what you do, no matter what it is, no matter what meeting it is, no matter what job it is, no matter what task it is, no matter what it is, you need to make sure that you're prepared to do that thing adequately. And sometimes it doesn't literally mean you. You might delegate and say, look, like, I can't worry about this, so you're going to worry about it and you're responsible for it. And that's how we're going to do this, right? I'm not going to know this, you are. But that's still making sure that it, you know, the preparation is there. You know, I think I would say, like, let me see if I have a story here, because I wrote some of this down, but I remember once we were preparing for a debate, and this actually wasn't with Chris, it was somebody else that I was helping. I was kind of just helping somebody on the side, and he was not he was speaking like a robot. And I know Dyese knows that the worst thing your candidate can do is just drone on endlessly with no personality about the thing that interests him and nobody else cares about. And I kept telling him this, and he wasn't listening. And I said to myself, all right, well, fine. And I purposefully provoked him emotionally. And we had a relationship where I could do that. But when he went into that debate, the emotion was there because I knew that's what he needed. And I think if someone had told me, hey, those are the kind of things that you're going to have to think about, like, well in advance of this debate happening, I would have realized it a lot better off, and I would have done a lot of things better than I did in the first place. So for my answer, Jessica, I'm preparation all the way.
Yeah, what's called definitely preparing, and, you know, giving the students the opportunity to prepare and also the opportunity to learn is a great point that you've made. Dyese, you want to pass it off to you?
Sure. So I think two things, they're actually kind of like a positive. So the one thing that I had learned when I first started was that we have this perception that everyone in government is a lot older, and, you know, they're in their like retirement ages. But working for the New Jersey legislature, I saw a lot of young people who looked like me. So I saw that there is opportunity for young people to get involved and be involved. And even though they may not be the front facing folks, we're all doing really, really important work. And I remember in one of my last days on the assembly side, I was looking around and I was like, this is so cool, right? Because everyone is like from 21 to like 40, right? And we have a couple of people who are older that are sprinkled in, but I'm just like, you know, it's amazing that we have these people who are here, who have the ears of legislators, who we can kind of try to help or influence to do things from a different perspective, right? Because we want fresh ideas, we want new ideas, and that's what's talked about a lot. But I don't think individuals really realize how many, younger people are here, and it was just very refreshing. And I think the other thing that I wish I had known is that legislators are people too. I think that we find them kind of like as untouchable or unapproachable, and they're just normal people like you and me. You know, as long as there's like respect when you come to the table, you can have a conversation with them. You don't have to be afraid. I have an intern that says ma'am a lot, and, you know, Mrs. And I really appreciate the opportunity. And it's like after we've been talking for like 3 months that she still starts everything like that. I'm like, listen, don't be intimidated. They're normal, just like me and you. Just go in, hi, how are you? Right? How are we doing? But you don't need to like have this flowery formality about it. And I think that a lot of that comes with intimidation and just kind of not being as confident. So, you know, for those who are watching, if you're ever interacting with a legislator, be respectful, right? You know, call them senator or assembly person or councilman or whatever, but like, also don't be afraid, because they're normal, just like me and you.
You know, Jessica, if I can.
Absolutely.
Dyese, I think you mentioned something that kind of got me thinking. They are people too, which means they're going to make mistakes. And you know, this is true both in the political field and in the government field. Something that I wish I'd been a little more prepared for was when they make what I think is, you know, someone's going to make a decision, right? And I think that decision is going to be wrong. Well, okay, like I'm welcome to give my opinion and say, you know, I actually think we should do this other thing, and for these 3 reasons, right? And then the candidate or the official can consider my reasons, but ultimately the decision is theirs. It's their name on the door, right? And as long as it's their name on the door, you have to learn how to make your case and then accept that they don't agree with you and carry out what they want you to do anyway. And that takes a degree of discipline. It takes a degree of emotional discipline to be able to say, I think you're wrong, and here's why. I accept that you don't agree with me, and you're not going to take my advice, and now I'm going to go carry out the thing that I don't agree with to the best of my ability. Everybody thinks they can just do that, and not everybody can just do that. It takes learning, and it takes a great deal of, like I said, discipline, and just a real understanding of the relationship to be able to do that, because that's just the story of it. Like I said, their name's on the door. It's not your name. So as long as it's their name, ultimately it's on them. It's not on you. And it takes some maturity to be able to do that.
And it depends on who you're dealing with too, right? So me working with the assembly members, my interactions with them are very different than how I interact with the senator. And it's just based on, you know, personalities and things like that. And I'm still learning how to do that, because I'm always like in the back of my head, I told you this is how it was going to work out. But, you know, at the end of the day, I had to do what I was sent on a mission to do. It doesn't matter what my, what I think it is. You just have to really plead your case. So we're almost like attorneys, right? Like we're pleading our case and we're saying, this is why, and this is why you should vote with me. But sometimes it's not how it ends up, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's like their name on the door.
Because sometimes we're wrong too, right?
Yep,
so
absolutely.
It sounds a lot like marriage and other long-term relationships. So it's like also, this is also a relationship session as well. And oftentimes politics is that. It is making those relationships. It's making those compromises and continuing to do the work. And I know, speaking for myself and everything, sometimes there's things in the workplace that they still have to do. They have to get done. Somebody has to do them, or you're not going to have a job anymore. You're not going to have an internship anymore. But so I really thank you both for highlighting that important point and talking a little bit about confidence as well. When I interview a lot of interns, I work with a lot of students, and the students that I remember are the ones that they're respectful, they can remain formal and everything, and in sending a good email and making a nice first impression, but they also have the confidence to say to me, I'm looking for more responsibility. I'm looking for more work. I'm looking to do more with this and get more out of it. So I think that's another great point. I want to talk a little bit about a memorable moment. So I'm going to start with Dyese. If there's like a moment of her time as an intern or chief of staff or other opportunity that was really memorable for you, either personally or professionally, because it is a lot of challenges, but sometimes it's a lot of fun too. So if there's ever been any moments that have been like really stuck out for you and made the job more impactful for you, or, you know, made it a little bit more enjoyable.
I think definitely being on the floor of the state house and like having that aha moment. And then also there was so housing here in housing across the state, especially now. But here in Monmouth County is particularly difficult. We don't see like in urban areas where people are like actually on the street. There's a lot of housing insecurity. There's a lot of people sleeping in cars where you don't really realize it until you hear about it. And that was something that like really became something that I'm trying to figure out how we can address. Because I was introduced to it through constituent services. Like it was nothing to have 5 homeless calls a week, right? And most of them on a Friday because it was hard to get in touch with someone to be housed over the weekend, or they were excluded for whatever reason because of the way regulations are or whatever. And I had one person that it reached out and said, hi, I'm going to be sleeping in my car. And it reached out to the senator directly and he said, she's not to sleep in her car, find her a house. And I was like, it's not that easy. And it took about a year. We were able to find her, things to kind of get her along. There was never a point where she was actually sleeping in her car. But it took about a year for me to be able to get her permanently housed. And I think that was like my favorite, just like the most heartwarming story that I had, because it's very difficult. And even though it took a year, like in reality, it really wasn't that long and things kind of just fell into place. And she was, I had to kind of talk her into being more of a self-advocate because there were some mental health issues, there was some depression because of circumstances that she had experienced. But to know that like and she had a dog, which is really hard with homelessness here because most shelters don't take animals. But I was able to get her permanently housed, and she called me from her house number, and I like cried because I was so excited that like she was there and she was stable and she was happy and getting back on her feet. So I think that's probably like my most memorable moment.
I love that. And I think it really highlights, there is a lot of work that has to be done, but when you see a really remarkable and important outcome, it makes all the work worth it. Scott, do you have a moment that you also want to share a little bit about?
First, I'm going to say that, Dyese, by no means am I equivocating what I'm about to say with what you just said, because I'm going to tell a political story. And, politics is not the same as housing people. One is obviously better and more important than the other. But nevertheless, so in politics, my favorite stories from my career are when we do our jobs, right? Because the way I look at this is, you have an ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is the re-election of your candidate. And then you have subordinate goals that you think are going to contribute to that goal. And if you achieve all your subordinate goals, then hopefully you're gonna get that final goal, right? And so I remember this time, and in fact, this goes back to our other point too about being wrong about something. So something that the Smith organization, as far as I know to this day, insists upon is that on election night, we have somebody physically at each municipal town hall to get the results. And there are going to be people throughout the state, some of whom I'm very close with, who will tell you that is absolutely insane. And that's because, hey, the whole thing is computerized. Like there's a computer that talks to another computer that spits out a thing where the entire world can see it on the internet. So like, why are you sending people physically to this spot to get something that probably, by the way, they're not going to get you as fast as the computer will? These are all valid questions, right? And so I remember this one year, I think it was 12 or 14, I don't remember which. But we had kind of had that discussion, and I was like, look, like to the leadership, like, do we really want to do this again? And like, yes, we absolutely want to do this again. I'm like, you're sure you want me to do this, right? There's like 44 towns in the district. You want me to find 44 people? They're like, we want you to find 38, right? Okay, all right. So we go out there, we arrange this, and it's a huge undertaking. Every year it is. And I'm waiting for my friend who's managing the campaign next to me to be like, hey, I told you had no reason to do that. On this particular day, computer systems failed. They just didn't work. The results just like half the results came in and the half were just not getting to the final computer. I forget exactly what the technical problem was, but it doesn't matter. And so then it turned out that all the campaigns that we were paired with looked to us, because we were the only guys with anybody on the ground, to physically go to the office and say, I want my results. What are they? And suddenly one, I was wrong because I had been reluctant to do this like incredibly complex task that I didn't think was right. And so I was overruled, and then I had the maturity, thankfully, at that point to actually go through and do it pretty well. So like one, I was wrong. And two, the system worked because the thing that we implemented when the computers just failed, we still had the results. When, it turned out, I think they didn't have them till sometime the next day on the computer. And so I really took from that a couple things. Like one, you can do a real good job at something that you don't personally agree with, and that's an important skill to have. And two, you need to live, you need to accept that you can be wrong about things, because you can. And three, when you're responsible, you're responsible. Like, and Dyese, I think you said this kind of at the beginning, like, when you own something, even at an intern level, you need to own it. Like when I tell my boss, okay, we will have people at those town halls getting those results. Well, if we don't, it's on me. So he needs to know that when he tells me to do that, even though I don't really want to do it, it's going to get done, and it's going to get done well. And Dyese, I think you said almost exactly that when we started, which is that, you need to be reliable. That is the number one thing you need to be. Like when you just have somebody, even if it's not in politics, any subordinate where you say, all right, this subordinate said, I'm going to do this and I don't have to worry about it again. That is priceless. So like the first thing that Jessica, your interns and your students should aspire to is to be that person at the bottom of the chain, because they're not going to be at the bottom of the chain very long if that's what they're doing.
Thank you both for sharing those moments. I think they both touch on like such important points about perseverance and, getting a great result at the end, but also being responsible as an intern so you can move up the ladder if you want to stay committed to this work. Now I want to talk a little bit, we only have 2 more questions and then we're going to get to our Q&A. But for one of our final questions, what's the day-to-day like of working in a legislative office or working on a campaign? Like, what's an average day? Not a horrible day, not an incredible day, but an average day. Just to kind of get our students prepared for, it's not going to be glamour every single day in the office. I think that's for all jobs, but it might not be awful every single day either. So Dyese, I'm going to start with you. If you could share a little bit about just the day-to-day tasks that an intern or individuals in your office work on.
Oh, for an intern, not for me.
If you want to share both.
Because it's for me, I'll scare them away.
Well, maybe the honesty is good.
So for an intern, you get a lot of experience in a lot of different things. You help us with our database tracking, with our constituent opinion tracking. So seeing what people are reaching out about, and making sure that they get an answer, whether it be that we're going to look into a piece of legislation, whether we're tracking if they're opposed or for a particular piece of legislation. We do a lot of outreach, so we let individuals know about various state programs, whether that be through a mailing, through person-to-person contact. We'll do mobile office hours where we go out in the community and just make sure people know that we're available to help should they need help with a state agency. Our office runs a little bit differently than other ledge offices, where we'll help a little bit more with like municipal and county things. So like I know Scott's wife very well because I reached out to her a lot for county issues to help navigate with constituents, and she was great. And staffing the senator at various events, really a whole host of things. And depending on what you bring to the table and, kind of how reliable you are, you might get more responsibility than you anticipated. So we had a couple of interns during the pandemic. We ran a vaccine program. So we were helping individuals get access to vaccines because it was very, very hard. So I had 2 very reliable interns and I said, this is the senator's idea, figure it out. And we were able to get about 5,000 people vaccinated. Right. So giving them that responsibility and obviously I was there to assist as needed, but, giving them like responsibility to kind of really step in and come into their own and learn how to do something like that. They didn't think that I was going to give them that responsibility. And I taught them to work smarter rather than harder. You don't have to work late hours. I don't want you to work late hours. Figure out a system so that you can be efficient and you can get it done without having to expend a lot of energy.
I think that's great when you do have students or interns that you can trust who do get the work done. It's so much easier working with somebody who takes the initiative to try and learn something new. So really great to hear that people can do a lot of different aspects in your office, or in offices in general. It's not just answering phones, it's not just getting coffee. It's a whole host of things that have to be accomplished. And Scott, campaigns are structured a bit differently, but talking about like a day-to-day, an average day on a campaign, let's do a good day or, an average.
An average day is mitigated chaos. And Dyese is like, yes, he's right. So again, I don't mean to scare anybody away. It's just better that you understand this is what it is. And I say this as someone who loves that job, was totally fulfilled by that job. And so I would do it again if I could, but so I don't say it badly, but it is mitigated chaos. And I say that because you just look at the situation you're in, right? So no matter what scale you're at, you don't have enough resources. Like if you're a national campaign or a municipal campaign, you don't have enough resources because you never do. You're in a totally uncertain environment because you've decided what your goals are, right? So you say, okay, I want my guy reelected or elected as the case may be. And I think that if I pursue this endorsement and talk to these people and get this many TV ads, I think that that will lead to his reelection. Well, okay, maybe it will, but maybe it won't. Maybe you're wrong and it's the other endorsement and it's the other group of people and it's the other TV ad. You don't know, you're guessing, right? You're guessing, that's all you're doing. And then you have the fact that all of this, almost all of it, is to a great degree beyond your own control, right? Because national news can break tomorrow and you need to just deal with it. And that can profoundly affect your campaign. I remember we were in mid-campaign season when the whole Kavanaugh thing happened. Like, without soliciting anybody's opinion on Justice Kavanaugh, I can tell you that that was a complicated day, okay? And so you have limited resources, uncertain information, it's beyond your control, all of it is beyond your control. Most of it's beyond your control. And then you need to work really, 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 really hard at it. And you're not really going to have an idea if you're doing a good job or not until election night. And even then, you can do a really good job, do all the right stuff, and really, really be excellent at what you do, and still lose the election because of things that you couldn't control. That is absolutely possible. And so that is an average day. There are good days, there are bad days, but that is basically what it is.
I think that's a great point to almost end on. And I want to just kind of to link all this kind of back together as we have our final question. We move on to our Q&A period. So how can students set themselves up for success in your opinion, or both of your opinions? We talked about reliability, we talked about initiative, we've talked a little bit about having some creativity as well and moving forward, and putting things together when you have no skills. But in your opinion, what's the best way to start themselves, or after these conversations, as a first step that they can take? So what's the first step? How can they set themselves up for success? Does that include having a mentor? Do you guys think mentors are important? But I want to end on that question for today. And I'll open up to either Dyese or Scott, whoever wants to start.
Whose turn is it, Dyese?
You can go.
All right. Okay. So I would just go back to preparation, because I will always tell this story. This is a great story, but Jessica, you have Gabriella working for you, and I'm sure some of your students might know her. But she was an intern of mine. That's how I ended up here, I guess, talking to you guys. But when she was really young, and don't get me wrong, Gabriella is brilliant, and I have only nice things to say about her, as does the whole Smith staff. But the thing about Gabriella is that she learns, and she does not. She's a human being. She makes mistakes. She doesn't make them twice. And I remember the first interview when she was still in college. She came in, and I was like, okay, we sat down, we're chatting. I'm like, all right, how many towns are in this district? And she didn't know. I was like, all right, how many counties are in the district? I think she knew that one. And then I asked her a couple more questions about things that, if you want to work on a campaign, you should probably know. And I hope she won't be mad at me for telling this story, but let me tell you, that was the last time Gabriella ever walked into a room in my presence where she wasn't prepared to be in that room and to speak persuasively about whatever it is that she's responsible for. And so she learned her lesson, and that is what I would tell your students. I would tell your students that do not walk into a room that you're not prepared to be, because people do that all the time and they don't learn their lesson like Gabriella did. You know, I had an intern who like just would not capture like the basic agenda of Chris Smith and why he should be a congressman. And I was just like, all right, well, like you can do that, but I'm not going to let you talk to any voters. And I didn't, because I'm not going to let you, you know, you're not going to represent the congressman if I'm responsible for that. And so I would say, like, if you're going for that interview, you're interviewing for your first political campaign or that first job, you don't need you know, and I'll talk about mentorship in a minute, but you don't need a mentor. You don't need anybody except an internet connection to be able to know who you're interviewing for, the candidate, who you're interviewing for, the person talking, what their LinkedIn looks like, what the candidate's agenda is, what's important to them, who, you know, which towns, counties, and other things make up the district. Like, this is like, basically I'm saying, do your homework. I think that's step one. Like, step one in this process is just do your homework and be responsible for walking into that room and knowing what you're talking about. If you can start there, you know, yeah, there's endless other things you need to do. The rest will come. Now, for mentorship, Jessica, I'll say that for me, that was really Chris's chief of staff, Mary Noonan. I don't know if anyone knows her, but she is immensely hardworking. She knows everything there is to know about a lot of things. But the thing about her was that she just demanded the best. And there was no, like, and she would support you. There was no, you know, I never felt like she wasn't behind me, but it was clear from day one that you're going to give your best or you're going to get out. That's what it's going to be. And if your best isn't right, well, she'll correct it. But that's what I wanted. Like, and that's what I found that I got from her that was so wonderful for me, was like, I'm going to teach you how to do this, but I'm also going to make demands of you. I'm not just going to like give you all this information and then like, oh yeah, it's okay when you're wrong. Like, no, it's not okay when you're wrong. Fix it. Right. And I'm not going to be mean about it, but we're going to fix it. We're going to get it right. And that attitude from a mentor, the simultaneous teaching, but also the demanding, that I thank you professionally, both in and out of the Army. In the Army, that means things to me. And so that's what I was looking for. And that's what I would tell any student of yours to seek in mentorship, Jessica.
And Dyese, do you want to close us out with just some steps you think students can take to, you know, set themselves up for success, and whether mentorship is included in that?
Sure. So setting yourself up for success, I am a big proponent of fake it till you make it. So, you know, that goes back to seeing legislators as people, having confidence in yourself. And even if you don't feel confident, or if you're not confident, just pretend, because most people can't tell, and be willing to do whatever is asked of you. You know, like, part of our constituent opinion tracking is a lot of data entry, and a lot of people don't like to do it. But if you do it wrong, you're not getting an opportunity to talk to a constituent. You're not going to get an opportunity to do the bigger things, because I need to see if you can follow directions. I was laughing when Scott said that Mary was like, you did it wrong, do it again, because we have people who answer the phones, and I'll get oh, someone's on the phone about this bill. Okay, who is it and what bill? Oh, I don't know, but I have their number, so can you call them back? No, you're going to call them back, and you're going to get their name. You're going to get the bill number.
I did that exact thing. Like, I'm not picking up that phone. What's wrong with you? I'm not picking. Yeah. Absolutely.
So then they'll call back, and I'll say, okay, what town do they live in? And they didn't ask it. Well, you need to call back again and find out what town they live in, because I don't want to baby you. Babying you does not help you to grow. I will help you. I will advise you. I will make recommendations, but you won't learn unless you're actually doing it. And I think it's very important to do that. I will never, ever baby anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. If my sister came in, she's going to work just as probably harder than other people that come into work, because you need to learn, and you need to be able to come to the table prepared and be able to do whatever you need to do, and just be ready. There's going to be things that you're going to be asked to do that you're not going to like. And it is what it is. You just smile and deal with it and keep it moving, because I can see in you what your capabilities are. I was trying to count. I think we've had about 4 or 5 interns that we've hired because we saw what they were capable of, and even more that we've helped get jobs in other places because they demonstrated that they were willing to do the work, willing to take on whatever was thrown at them. and they had that confidence, whether it was actually there or not. As it pertains to mentorship, I think it's good to have a mentor, but I think that's like a mutual relationship, right? You can't just say, hey, you're my mentor, because there's a lot that goes into it that that person may not be willing or ready to give. I think it's also important to recognize that sometimes your mentors become a peer. When you're younger, or when you're in a certain stage in your professional life, you might have someone that you rely on a lot until you get to that point where you don't necessarily need them for that mentorship exactly, but you can see them more as a peer and work together rather than that person being the one that you go to for advice. I think a mentor is beneficial, but I don't think it's the be all end all. And I think that it's something that is more organically grown versus, okay, we're going to set you guys up and I hope it works. It's like speed dating, right? Like, you ask a couple of questions, you see if you guys get along, but it might not work out, and it might be someone who you really, really, really wanted as your mentor. But if that relationship isn't there, if you're not on the same page, if you're not ready to like really dive in deep with certain things, it's not worth continuing to pursue it. So don't get stuck on the idea of having a mentor. If it happens, it'll happen organically. But if it doesn't, that doesn't mean that like you're finished.
I think that's a great point. And I think one point I wanted to note on is a mentor doesn't need to know that they are your mentor. Like oftentimes my mentors, they don't know that they're my mentors. They're people I look up to or I admire because of certain characteristics, but I never had a formal meeting with someone and say, I want you to be my mentor. I want you to guide me. I think the best relationships and the best things that you can get out of a working relationship with somebody is really, looking to them for advice and everything, but also taking initiative and seeing what they have done and how you could do that for yourself as well. So just the individual initiative is really important as well. So we have I don't think we're unfortunately going to be able to get to Q&A today because we've had such a great conversation. We've touched on so many important points about working on a campaign, working in a legislative office, the things that are looked for in interns. And a lot of these skills are really skills that are, applicable to all internships, not just political campaigns, not just legislative work. These are skills that can be utilized for all internships moving forward. So I want to give a huge thank you to our panelists, Scott and Dyese. It's been wonderful getting to know you both a little bit more and really hearing your experience and the journeys that you both have taken to where you are today. And I know especially that you both have a very long and prosperous careers ahead of you still. So I really appreciate you both taking the time to join us today and really speak to our students. Additionally, I want to give a huge thank you to the Eagleton Institute of Politics for supporting this event today. And also our co-sponsor, the Division of Diversity, Inclusion and Equity, Diversity, Inclusion and Civic Engagement at Rutgers University Camden as well. Do we have any other final notes before we sign off for today? From any of our panelists?
I'm good. Thank you, Jessica, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I may have looked at the Q&A. Election night is stressful. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yes, from Gabriella Marone, election night, I'm sure is going to be very stressful. But if people have anything else, I really appreciate everyone joining us today. Thank you so much. We're still in the process of determining our third and final session, so keep and follow the Center for Youth Political Participation on social media, and we'll get back to you with a full recording of this event. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was great meeting you both. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Great meeting you.